Good morning. Welcome to your new day. It's Thursday, April 19th, now 8 o'clock in the East, and we begin with breaking news as President Trump faces firestorms on multiple fronts. Get this. CNN has spoken to more than 24 Republican lawmakers, many of them senior senators, and they say it's too early to tell our reporter whether or not they will back the President of the United States, their party's standard bearer for re-election in 2020, the leader of their own party. Now, this comes as 40 Republicans have announced they're leaving Congress, including the Speaker of the House.
President Trump expressing optimism about his upcoming summit with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, but the president says he is willing to walk away if the talks are not fruitful. The president also trying to convince the world that no one has been tougher on Russia than him, despite changing his mind on sanctions and throwing Ambassador Nikki Haley under the bus in the process. So let's begin with CNN's Manu Raju with our new reporting and our top story. Manu.
Good morning. Now, a wide array of House and Senate Republicans tell me they aren't ready to endorse President Trump's bid for a second term. This reflecting the deep uncertainty on the Hill over his political standing and the tenuous relationship he has with his party. Now, over the last week or so, I've spoke to more than 24 lawmakers representing a cross-section of the GOP, and for the most part, members were mum. They said it was too early to make such a decision. They did not know if he would face a primary challenge, and they were still uncertain the president would ultimately stand for re-election, even though President Trump has repeatedly said he would run, hired a campaign staff, raised money, held rallies, announced he would run soon after taking office, but still, some members aren't so sure. Now, this is all rather unusual since most presidents automatically get support from lawmakers from their own party without a blink of an eye. But not this time.
You prepared at this point to endorse the president for re-election in 2020?
I haven't even thought about that election. I'm worried about the midterm elections.
I did not endorse the president for the Republican nomination in 2016. I supported first Jeb Bush and then John Kasich. So, again, I think it is far too early to make a judgment of that type.
Will you support the president for re-election?
Again, I'm focused on working and doing what I do. And so talk about what might happen at that time is I think premature.
Now, many Republicans do not think there's any room for a primary challenge against Trump. They think it's a bad idea to run against him, pointing to history like in 76, 80, and 92, when sitting presidents were challenged within their respective parties. They won their primaries, but they lost the general elections. Moreover, Trump ran against his own party in 2016, and he still maintains rock-solid support among base GOP voters and may not really care what his party in Washington believes. But one prospective 2020 challenger, Jeff Flake, the Arizona senator who is retiring at the end of the year, told me, quote, I wouldn't gauge what support there is a year and a half from now from what there is now among base GOP voters. So we will see what support there is for Trump from his own party on Capitol Hill come 2020 and whether that makes any difference at all. Guys.
All right, Manu, very interesting. Thank you for sharing your reporting with us.
Allison and Chris.
All right, Ab, thank you very much. Let's bring in CNN political director David Chalian and CNN political analyst Julie Pace. Two big brains with encyclopedic minds when it comes to the history of politics. David Chalian, remind me the last time when asked well in advance of the next election, members of a political party said, I don't know if I support the president who is the standard bearer of my party.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that question always gets asked. I think this particular presidency sort of begs that question in a way that some of his predecessors did not, Chris. But I do think what's important to note here of what's the difference. You got to remember, past presidents, they would not even be running technically for re-election at this stage of the game. We're probably a little less than a year away from when past presidents would sort of open up their campaign accounts and start doing their fundraising, gearing up for their re-election campaign. Donald Trump did that inauguration weekend of his first term. So he is a fully declared presidential candidate. He's got an open campaign account. He is running for re-election again in the very literal term, which to me makes this question all the more legitimate, even though we are eons away in American politics from what the ramifications of folks on the Hill not yet supporting the president, what that may mean, because that's a long time in American politics. But it is significant that Donald Trump is out there, has a campaign operation, has named a campaign manager, is raising money for his campaign. And once again, we see this split between Donald Trump and Republicans on Capitol Hill, which is not necessarily the determinative decision makers on whether or not the president gets reelected, of course. But nonetheless, the establishment of his party, the folks he has to work with on Capitol Hill, are not obviously just pro forma saying, of course I'm with this guy.
And so what do you make of that, Julie? If this same question had been asked at this same time in George W. Bush's presidency, would it have been a no-brainer for people? Is there any other historical context through which we can look at what happened with Manu's reporting?
I think based on our past few presidents, this would have been a no-brainer. I think that people from a party generally just support their incumbent president. It makes it a heck of a lot easier for a party if they don't have a primary challenger to a sitting president for their own re-election prospects. But, you know, David and Manu in his earlier reporting, I think, do make a good point. It's unclear for someone like Trump whether not having the full-throated support of his party actually matters. So much of his brand is actually tied up in this idea that he's not of the Washington establishment, that he's not necessarily in lockstep even with his own party's leaders. In some respects, that actually could potentially help this president.
All right. We'll leave it at that, I guess. You know, I think it's weird. I've never heard anything like this before. I thought, I think I'm going to be buying lots of people lunches, because when they say he's going to get primaried, I say, I don't see it. Maybe like a Ben Sass,
right.
You know, some younger guy, get your name out there.
Right.
But maybe I'm wrong.
But to
Chris,
Julie's
just
point,
remember, though,
just one thing, David. To Julie's point, he's an anti-establishment candidate.
Right.
He's run as that.
But he is the putative head of the Republican
I
Party.
agree.
It's
You
just
can see it both ways.
And remember this also, something we call out on the show all the time. These same men who are saying that they won't say whether or not they support him, they don't stand up against him either. It's not like there's some voices of independent thought down there. Let me ask you about something else.